goes to the Leader of the Opposition, Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Can I join the Prime Minister in his comments about Hillsborough and Mike Weatherby? Mr Speaker, this morning the Prime Minister's former closest adviser said, when the public needed us most, the government failed. Does the Prime Minister agree with that?
Mr Speaker, the handling of this pandemic has been one of the most difficult things this country has had to do for a very long time. And none of the decisions have been easy. To go into a lockdown is a traumatic thing for a country. To deal with a pandemic on this scale has been appallingly difficult, and we've at every stage tried to minimise loss of life, to save lives, to protect the NHS, and we have followed the best scientific advice that we can, Mr Speaker.
Mr Speaker, can I remind the Prime Minister that 1 year ago, almost to the day, he described his former adviser as, in his words, in every respect, acting responsibly, legally and with integrity. This morning, that same adviser has said that senior ministers fell, his words, disastrously short of the standards that the public has a right to expect of its government, and that lives were lost as a result. Does the Prime Minister accept that central allegation and that his inaction led to needless deaths?
No, Mr Speaker, and of course all those matters will be reviewed in the course of the public inquiry that I have announced. I notice that he is fixated, as ever, on the rear-view mirror, Mr Speaker, whilst we on this side of the House are getting on with our job of rolling out the vaccines, making sure that we protect the people of this country. And that, I think, has been the decisive development on which I think people are rightly focusing. And I can tell the House that in spite of the continuing concern that we have about the Indian variant, we are increasing our vaccination programme at such a rate that we can now ask everybody over 30 to come forward, Mr Speaker, and get vaccinated.
Keir Starmer.
Mr Speaker, it's no good the Prime Minister attacking me. It's his former chief adviser who's looking back and telling the world how useless the Prime Minister was in taking key decisions. His former adviser. One of the most serious points made this morning is that the Prime Minister failed to recognise the severity of this virus until it was too late, dismissing it as, quote from this morning, another scare story, like the swine flu. Does the Prime Minister recognise that account of his own behaviour? And if so, will he apologise for being so complacent about the threat that this virus posed?
Mr Speaker, I don't think anybody could credibly accuse this government of being complacent about the threat that this virus posed at any point. We have worked flat out, Mr Speaker, to minimise loss of life, to protect the NHS, while they have flip-flopped, Mr Speaker, from one position to another, backing curfew one day, opposing it the next, backing lockdowns one day, opposing it the next, calling for tougher border controls one day, then saying that quarantine is a blunt instrument the next. Mr Speaker, we have got on with the job of protecting the people of this country from one of the worst pandemics in living memory, if not the worst in living memory. We have turned the corner, and it is no thanks, Mr Speaker, to the loyal opposition opposite.
Mr Speaker, I can see that the evidence of his former adviser is really getting to the Prime Minister this morning in that response. Another incredibly serious statement from the Prime Minister's former adviser this morning concerns the conduct of the Health Secretary, including an allegation that the Health Secretary misled other ministers and officials on a number of occasions. Now, I don't expect the Prime Minister to respond to that, but can he confirm from this morning's evidence, can the Prime Minister, can he confirm, did the Cabinet Secretary advise him, the Prime Minister, that he, the Cabinet Secretary, had, quote, lost faith in the Health Secretary's honesty?
The answer to that is no, Mr Speaker, and I'm afraid I haven't had the benefit of seeing the evidence that he's bringing to the House, but I must say that I think what the people of this country want us all to do is to get on with the delicate business now of trying to reopen our economy and restore people's freedoms, get back to our way of life, by rolling out the vaccine. I would have thought that that was a much more profitable line of inquiry for the right honourable gentleman today. And that's why I think the people of this country want us to focus on.
Keir Starmer.
Speaker, the Prime Minister can't have it both ways. Either his former adviser is telling the truth, in which case the Prime Minister should answer the allegations, or the Prime Minister has to suggest that his former adviser is not telling the truth, which raises serious questions about the Prime Minister's judgment in appointing him in the first place. There's a pattern of behaviour here. There was clearly a lack of planning, poor decision-making and a lack of transparency, and a Prime Minister who was absent from the key decisions, including 5 early Cobra meetings, and who was, to quote his former adviser, 1,000% too obsessed with the media. But another central allegation briefed overnight is that the Prime Minister delayed the circuit break over the autumn half-term because, quote, COVID was only killing 80-year-olds. Can I remind the Prime Minister that over 83,000 people over 80 lost their lives to this virus, and that his decision to delay for 40 days from the sage guidance on the 21st of September until the 31st of October will be seen as one of the single biggest failings of the last year. Now having been told of the evidence, does the Prime Minister accept that he used the words "COVID was only killing 80-year-olds" or words to those effect?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we saw what happened during the pandemic, and particularly he talks about the September lockdown and my approach to it, and the very, very difficult decision that the country faced. And of course, this will be a matter for the inquiry to go into. But we have an objective test, Mr. Speaker, in the sense that there was a circuit breaker of the kind he describes in Wales. It did not work, and I'm afraid, Mr. Speaker, I'm absolutely confident that we took the decisions in the best interests of the British people. When it comes to hindsight, Mr. Speaker, I could just remind the right honourable gentleman that he actually, he denied this at the time, and then had to correct it, but he voted to stay in the European Medicines Agency, Mr. Speaker, which would have made it impossible for us to do the vaccine rollout at the pace that we have.
Mr. Speaker, it's not me giving evidence this morning, it's his former adviser. And I note the Prime Minister is careful not to refute these allegations. Mr. Speaker, what we're seeing today is the latest chapter of a story of confusion, chaos and deadly misjudgments from this government. From a Prime Minister governing by press release, not a plan. In the last 24 hours, we've seen the same mistakes made again, with the ridiculous way 1.7 million people in Bolton, Burnley, Bedford, Blackburn, Kirklees, Hounslow, Leicester and North Tyneside have been treated. In the light of the drip of these very serious allegations and the failure of the Prime Minister to provide even basic answers and continuing mistakes affecting millions of people, does the Prime Minister now recognise he must bring forward the timing of the public inquiry into COVID and that it should start this summer and as soon as possible?
No, Mr. Speaker, as I've said before, I'm not going to concentrate valuable official time on that now, whilst we're still battling a pandemic. And I thought, actually, that was what the House had agreed on. And, Mr. Speaker, he continues to play these pointless political games whilst we get on with delivering on the people's priorities. 14 new hospitals, 8,771 more police on our streets. Now we're getting on with sorting out the railways, Mr. Speaker. We're giving the young people the opportunity of home ownership in a way they've never had before, with 95% more mortgages. And we've vaccinated, we've delivered 60 million vaccinations across this country. More, and he loves these European comparisons, Mr. Speaker, more than any other European country, including 22 million second doses. And that, with great respect to the right honourable gentleman, I believe that is the priority of the British people. That's really what they're focused on, whilst he voted to stay in the European Medicines Agency. They vaccinate, Mr. Speaker. We vaccinate. They deliberate. We deliver.
Thanks for watching. We can only hold power to account with your support. So do support us if you can by joining up on YouTube, Patreon, or through the Byline Times website.